Hey y'all, in this video, I'm going to share 7 small business terms you should know. Let's get into it. Hey there, this is Tiffany with Boss on the Budget. I help new and small nonprofits get up and running, and I decided to do something a little different for this video. I want to talk to the business people. Now, running a nonprofit, you're still running a nonprofit business, but I wanted to talk to anybody who's running a business because Boss on the Budget is also a business, and I want to share the insights and the things that I've learned from running a business along with helping others launch their nonprofits. And here's the thing, at least in my culture, we haven't always talked about how to start a business. Like, people don't always break down terms so you understand what you're getting yourself into. So when you're starting a business, sometimes it's a stumble. You're falling into stuff, you're figuring things out as you grow. And I wanted to do a video and honestly do a series of videos on Small Business 101 to share the things that you may be afraid to say you don't know, but to break down simple terms to help you navigate running your own or launching your own business. So in this video, I'm going to break down 7 accounting terms that may be helpful for those of y'all who are running your business to help you figure out how to plan and how to strategize. Now, forgive me if these terms feel too basic for you, but I don't think that anything is too basic, because I often think that people make assumptions about what they know or what others may know, and some of us just really don't get it or don't know. And I'd like to say this though, I'm not an accountant, I'm not your accountant, so I'm just sharing these terms for general information and just sharing my understanding of them and translating my understanding to help somebody who may be confused on their journey. So the first term I want to break down is revenue. And revenue is simply the money that you bring in as a result of your business operations. And that money can be received in different ways. It could be money that you directly make with the product that you sell. If you're a nonprofit, it could include grants, it could include donations, it could include interest income on investments that you have, or interest income from money you have sitting in bank accounts. It could include all of that, but it's just essentially the money that you are bringing in for your organization. Now, the second term that I want to talk about is your expenses. And your expenses are basically what it costs or what you put out in order to run your business. So it's the opposite of revenue. So your expenses are the things that you have to pay for in order to run your business. And when I talk about budgeting, specifically when I talk about budgeting for nonprofits, I talk about how on your budget, your revenue's up top and your expenses are on the bottom. And usually when you're starting your budget, you start with your expenses. You start with what you plan to spend, what you hope to do, what you hope to accomplish, and you translate that in numbers, and that's translated in numbers on your expense side. So the expenses could be rent, it could be utilities, it could be telephone, printing, marketing, all those different costs. And so you're laying out for yourself what it costs to do business, and then on top of your expenses, you're going to put your revenue, and it's how you plan to make the money to cover the expenses. So the reason why it's important to talk about this is because, first of all, most people don't budget with their business, and especially with their nonprofits. But second of all, I think it's important for us to plan that way, to think about revenue, to think about how we really want to make money and not just dream it up. Not just say, I want to make $1 million, but really assign that numbers and really compare it to what you plan to spend to make sure that, first of all, that you're planning to make enough money, and second of all, that there actually is some kind of plan to do it. So when you're thinking about your budgeting and you're thinking about your revenue, think about what you want to sell, where you even want the money to come from. What are the big chunks? Is 50% of your revenue going to come from something? Is 25% of it's going to come from something? Where's that money going to come from? And then break it down even further and ask yourself, well, how much effort am I going to put in to make sure that I can get this goal? Like, how much do I need to do in order to make this revenue goal? And I think the mistake that I made with my business is not thinking about revenue goals, I just thought about selling. I didn't think about it in the context of every month I want to make sure I want to make this much. And I know if I make this much, then I could do this. And I know it takes this much to be able to reach this goal. I was not thinking about that at all. And I have learned that if you want to be successful in business, you got to have your revenue goals. So I hope that was helpful to talk about revenues and expenses as the first two terms. The next term I'm going to talk about is assets. And this one really threw me for a loop. I never really understood what assets meant. And assets are just something of economic value or potential economic value. So it's something that you possess or it's something that you own that has some kind of economic value that you can have as an asset. So cash is an asset. If you have cash in the bank, that's an asset because it has economic value. Or if you own some kind of property, you own a building or you own a piece of large equipment, that could potentially be an asset. Now, I'm starting to go into territory where I'm gonna say to y'all, I'm not an accountant, but it's really important to know the basics of this. So when you do talk to an accountant, you have a foundational understanding, right? So understanding what your assets are important because I know assets depreciate, meaning they lose their value. So what the value was when you bought it may be different, it may be more, it may be less. So for your property, for example, the value may be more, and so your assets may increase, the value of your assets may increase. So all that really does depend, but it's important for you as a business owner to have an understanding what your assets are and having a value for those assets, because that helps position you for funding and it helps position you for other opportunities. So it's important to know what your assets are. And the next term that I want to go over is liabilities, which is again the flip side of assets. And a liability is something that you owe or something that you borrowed that hasn't been paid yet. So you're basically owing a debt to someone. So a liability can typically be like a loan, but a liability could also be money that you know you got to pay out. It's not time to pay it, like a bill. So you know you have a bill that's due, but you have 30 days to pay it. So that's a liability until you pay it, because it's money that really isn't yours. It's going to somebody else, even though it's still in your bank account right now. So liabilities are everything that you currently owe that you got to pay on. So maybe you have a mortgage, that's a liability, or a car note, that's a liability. And oftentimes people, to kind of assess your value, may subtract your assets from your liabilities to see what your total value is. But it's just really important to know like both and to understand what they mean and have that foundational knowledge like I talked about. So you may have heard people talk about with accounting, or when you set up your accounting system for your business, the software may ask you, are you a cash basis or you accrual basis? So I'm going to talk about these next two terms together. And you may be confused about what that means when it comes to your accounting and just pick something random, but it does mean something and you got to know why you're choosing it, okay? So cash or accrual basis refers to accounting, and that just means how you record financial transactions in your business. So if you say that you are on a cash basis, that means that you are recording everything once the money goes out, right? So it didn't happen unless something transpired where cash went out or went in. So every time that you're recording an expense, you're only recording it once you've spent it. So like I said, with liabilities, sometimes you owe something. Well, on a cash basis, that's not really reflected in how you're doing your accounting. You only are reflecting the money that's gone once the money actually literally goes out, right? So that's when you're using a cash basis. Now, accrual basis is different. Accrual basis means that you are recording things that you owe that haven't paid out yet. And you're using that as a way to plan for your business instead of only looking at things that have actually been spent. So on an accrual basis, you may owe a bill that's 30 days due from now, but in your accounting, it looks like that money is not in your accounts, even though it physically actually may be. But when you're doing your accounting, it's already pulled out because you've recorded it as a liability already. You've recorded it as already being spent. Okay? So what does that mean when you compare the two? That means that if you're using cash basis, then if you owe something, then you may not, when you're only looking at what you have on a cash basis, you may not have an accurate reflection of how much money you really have or how much you have really to spend. Because you're not thinking about, oh, yeah, I may have cash in the bank, but for real, I got all these bills that are about to hit. And you may not have like a full picture of what's coming down the pike. When you use an accrual basis for accounting, you're taking into consideration when you're looking at your finances, things that you know are going to have to be paid. So you're more accurate in looking at like your forecasting and what you plan to spend or what you need to spend or what you need not to spend based on what your accounting looks like. And the final term that I want to talk about is return on investment, which is sometimes referred to as ROI. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this term is because too many times we don't think about the ROI. So when people say, what's the return on investment? I've noticed that people talk about it in different ways. So sometimes they'll actually have a percentage, and that percentage is based on how much money that they made divided by how much money they put in, how much money they invested to get that outcome, right? So they're trying to really determine how much, based on how much I put up for this, how much money I put up for this, did I get a return on my investment? And so you're looking at what your return is and you're comparing it to what you put in. And that's just like a straightforward percentage. But some people talk about it kind of more broadly, more like, I've invested time, and sometimes you can't calculate your time. I invested my time or my mental energy into something, and this is the result of that. Did I get my return on my investment? So you can think about it that way as well, not just the percentage. And so when we talk about return on investment, it just means, what did you get in return for what you put in? And you use it as a way to determine whether or not you should continue either at the level that you're investing or at all. Because if you don't have a good enough return on investment for what you're doing, then that's a signal to you that you may need to change something. And this is different for everybody. So some people may want a very high return on their investment in order to feel like it's worth it. But some people don't need a high return because there are other reasons why they may be doing what they're doing. So if it's a lower return on investment, it still may be okay for them. So it depends on where you are. It depends on what your hopes and what your goals are for your business. But regardless of what your number is or what way you're thinking about it, it's important that you are thinking about your return on your investment and you are assessing whether or not the things that you're putting into something is worth what you're getting in return. So I hope that was helpful, y'all. So this was me starting my business series. I'm going to be recording other videos on running a small business. I hope it was helpful. If you need help, you can always visit my website, bossonabudget.com, specifically if you want to start a nonprofit and you need help raising startup funding. But if you need help from me one-on-one, I do provide one-on-one consultations, and I also provide ongoing coaching. So if you need information about that, I have put that in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.